Okay, so good afternoon everyone, and good morning to those of you that have joined us from the States. Thank you for coming along today. Of course, today is a live event. We're streaming it and recording it, so if you do have to leave us at some point, you can watch this at a later date. If you do have any questions, we want this to be a really interactive session. You should all have access to turn on your microphone, but if you can wait till the end of the presentation. But if you do have any questions, please ask the questions in the chat box. Can you just make sure that your PC or phone is on mute, just to make sure we don't interrupt our speakers today. If you do have any questions as well, we do have the app, and some of the presenters today are on the app, so please feel free to ask them questions after the event. So today we have three great speakers. Oh, for those of you who've just joined, could you please make sure that you're on mute? As I said, we have three great speakers and three great subjects. So we've been asked by a lot of people, how can we increase the profile of payroll? And I think today we'll have some of those answers, you know, talking about data, how to engage your stakeholders, and also how to deal with a procurement, because I think that can be a common issue, Julie. And just to introduce you to our speakers, if you'd just like to introduce yourself, Adrian, would you like to introduce yourself first?
Yeah, thanks, Mel. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Adrian Morrissey, Commercial Director for the region with Immedis. You'll probably see today I'm the victim of a COVID haircut. I don't quite have as much hair as I did in that photo, but looking forward to being part of this today. I know everybody finds that the remoteness of our current environment a little bit of a challenge, so I think these days take on a little bit more significance.
Okay, and Bob Rehill, would you like to introduce yourself to everyone?
Yeah, hi. So I'm Bob Rehill. I'm the founder and CEO of Bob Rehill and Associates. Have spent the last sort of 20 years helping organisations as an independent consultant and through my network through transformation projects and programs that include finance, HR, and payroll. So pleased to be able to share some of my insight today, and look forward to getting some questions as well.
And our final speaker is Julie Smith. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thanks Mel. Hi everyone. Thanks so much for making the time today. So I'm Julie Smith. I've been working in global procurement for about 15 years in a range of different industries, companies and countries, and throughout my procurement career have always supported HR, of which payroll was key to that. So I'm really looking forward to sharing with you today about how you can effectively work with your procurement teams.
Thank you. And obviously, because we're all working from home, hopefully you won't hear them, but just to introduce the additional members of the GPA team, you know, let's hope we don't get any deliveries this afternoon. So let's start off with our first subject. So I'm just going to stop sharing my screen and I'll pass you over to Adrian.
Thanks, Mel. Just share my screen. And the usual question, can everybody see my screen?
Mel,
you can. Okay, perfect. Great. So look, I think the topic that Mel touched on is obviously extremely pertinent for all people within this particular function. How do we get greater visibility across the organization? So I really want to hone in on one aspect of this and bring to life, hopefully, how that, I suppose, whole concept of payroll analytics can actually drive group-wide impacts across the insights that you can actually access through those kind of insights that are available to you as part of that particular function. So not going to go into detail on my background, just you're obviously aware who I am, what I do now, Commercial Director for EMEA. With the business 3 years, I've been in international business development roles, both in Ireland and in the US for just around 10 years at this point. I guess the whole concept of payroll, I would have been introduced to me just through a close contact of mine, and you know, payroll, I suppose, is evolving, it's changing. I was extremely interested in the concept of where the future of this industry is heading. And I think the focus on data now is even more pertinent and more crucial than it was even 3-4 years ago. And I think that is fundamentally changing the role and focus of a lot of people who are operating in this space right now. So I'm enjoying the journey and the evolving nature of this market. So a few things that I really want to focus in on today, and going to keep it quite simple. I want to keep it open. There's some key concepts that I really want to hammer with you guys today, and that's really how to, I suppose, gain that visibility and top of the house kind of buy-in from certain aspects of an organization which you've found challenging to get in the past. Assessing the here and now is very much focused on, what do you need to have access to in order to actually justify to the top of the house, or the powers that be in an organization, the challenges as it relates to where people struggle around the whole space around analytics as it relates to payroll, and then just, I suppose, best practice, moving the dial, what to look for, move away from the legacy focus. Let's look at the future. Let's talk about how we can build a different future for this industry and how payroll analytics leads into that concept. And then just some of the key kind of reports that should be accessible on a good platform, and how that data is actually pulled together. So the power of payroll data, it's a very strong term. So that's very much how we harness those actionable insights through this information. So the concept of payroll analytics, which I'm going to bring to life today, is very much about the intersection of people, processes, and technology. So leveraging everything that you have in the tool set that's available to you to make sure that you optimize what you have and have the greatest ability to have a group-wide impact is ultimately what a good platform and a good analytics tool set should do for you. So it should also provide, a central location to access all of that information. And we all know that payroll data is complex, it's varied, it exists within an extremely diverse ecosystem. And more often than not, the major challenge is that it's not all centrally controlled and managed. But it should bring together all of those disparate parts of payroll through, jurisdictional operations, through different concepts that apply in some legislative environments and maybe not in others, and bringing all of that into a centralized view of the world in a way that gives you the ability, to really kind of see everything at once without losing the granularity of detail that often is lost when you move global at a local level. And I suppose this sounds like a contradiction in terms. How do you actually roll everything up to a global level and at the same time still hold that granularity that you need to properly manage at a payroll at a local level? So the way that a platform that will allow you to do this will work and operate, it will pull data at a very granular level. So we're talking about detail down to every element of pay, for every person globally, for every period, everything that you would see on a pay slip, but pulling all of that together in a single structured way of managing it. So it's very, very different, and the opposite really to the classic kind of, patchwork quilt approach to global payroll that would have been, I guess, the legacy of the industry, and still is the legacy of the industry, and still quite pertinent as we see it. And I suppose a lot of the discussions we have is that it is disparate system, it's multiple platforms, it's very difficult to standardize the output from the true cost of payroll. And that's really something that is a challenge for a lot of organizations. But with this approach where you're pulling it at that level, you're effectively getting different structures of data, different structures of gross to nets, depending on the jurisdictions you're operating in. But the granular level access really eradicates this concept and moves things to the next level. One final key component, which companies I think are crying out for, based on discussions we have, because you'll always have local, you'll always have regional, you'll always have global, and the next generation analytics platforms have the ability to consolidate all of your global reporting into unified currency. So regardless of the jurisdiction or currency that you're operating your payroll in, being able to report that on a global scale in one or more currencies, depending on your specific needs and reporting requirements, will be a key enabler for rolling up the value of the data you pull from your platform at regional, at global, and right back down to local level in the local currency of choice. So they're just some of the kind of key concepts that I wanted to touch on. And some of the things that I want to touch on now will be around the visibility. How do we get greater visibility in the organization? And how can we, as a department, utilize the power of what we have access to in a way that changes the perception of how payroll is viewed in an organization? And it's not that it's viewed in a negative light. It's just often, I suppose, the value of that department and the group-wide impact is often overlooked if the right tools are not being harnessed to bring it to the top of the table. So if you get this piece right, the perception of the value that payroll will bring will shift hugely across the entire business. So one of the key challenges is, again, getting group-wide buy-in, stakeholder engagement, which I know Bob and Julie will kind of bring together holistically when I'm finished. But this is not just about payroll. This is about people. It's about pay. It's about productivity. It's about analysis, insight, strategic value, all happening at that key intersection where people, process, and technology meet. So the whole concept of aligning your payroll strategy with the corporate vision of an organization takes on even greater significance. How can you really bring the value or the status of payroll if it's completely disconnected to what the company are trying to achieve at a corporate level? What do I mean by that? So elevating that position. So if you understand the corporate strategy and vision and understand how payroll plays into that strategy and can play a key role on that journey, then you're in a completely different position if you're running an independent project and doing a solo run disconnected from that strategy. I'll give you one example of what that means. So you think about a company who are on a journey, right? So the plan for the company and the corporate strategy is to IPO in 3 years' time. You're the head of global payroll and you're struggling with all of these independent solutions. You're dealing with disparate reporting platforms and you cannot bring everything together. Now, this is an opportunity for you in that role to link what you want to do to clean up your payroll department and how it's managed with that vision. So if a CEO is going to a global controller and they're looking to IPO in 3 years, how can you play a part in that? Well, what does that controller need? Basic stuff, standardized processes, clean reporting, cost analysis in real time, predictive analysis based on trends over time. And that may include things as basic as departmental budgeting. You should be in a position to sell all of this in a really powerful way and link it back to that strategy. You won't ultimately be the main reason that the company will IPO or get there, but you can absolutely play a pivotal role in that, on that journey, if you get this right. So I think that's one key message. Don't ever try and run a payroll project and get business stakeholder buy-in internally if it's totally disconnected from where the company are trying to go around that strategy, around that vision. Make sure it's always linked to that corporate goal, and that would be your anchor, and you build your message around that. So if you get that right around the IPO piece, again, you're talking about fueling growth, you're talking about cutting costs, you're talking about removing waste as it relates to unnecessary spend by providing actionable insights from payroll. And don't forget, any controller will be absolutely clear that 60-70% of the costs of the organization are run through payroll. So why not harness that? You have that at your fingertips if you get this right. Leveraging your data, that's just a byproduct of linking it to the journey. You get the platform right, you get the analytics right, and you're very much a long way to getting to the point of convincing, leveraging payroll. It ultimately, the data that runs through payroll, you should ultimately be effectively utilizing those insights to shape the future of the business. And again, you link it back to that IPO journey. If you can do that, you don't have to convince anyone because it serves an absolute corporate purpose. Third piece, corporate alignment. I've already talked about it, almost to it in an inch of its life now, but corporate alignment is key. Payroll should be aligned with the corporate vision. Predictive analysis, future focused. The group-wide impact is something that people struggle with. And if you think about any payroll project, how many people does it touch in the organization? Well, the basic answer is everyone, because everyone has to get paid and payroll is part of that. But in terms of the actual positive knock-on effect to other departments within the organization, that's sometimes overlooked and forgotten because you get so consumed by the day-to-day of payroll. It's one of the most challenging jobs that exists in any organization. You're solely responsible for the reason that people go to work, to get paid. So that is the key priority. So often getting time to just think outside of that is a challenge. So, where can these positive impacts exist? So let's just think about other departments. So compliance departments, how can you bring them into the discussion and give a positive impact? Lower touch processing, reduction in human error, increased accuracy, lower costs, better business behaviors, accurate filings, zero fines. These are all the byproduct of good payroll practice through technology when it's embraced. And analytics can certainly support trends in your organization that can often bring to light things you weren't even aware of. If you think of other aspects of that, there should be different users of, the analytics platform for different levels of information. Day to day, clearly payroll will benefit at a local, at a region, at a global level. But just think about the control functions. So finance outside of payroll, internal audit, and even potentially external audit. If you can expose a platform of analytics that controls everything and logs everything historically on it, then ultimately you're doing the job for the external auditors. You expose that to them as a temporary access. You don't have to go anywhere beyond that platform. You think about finance outside of payroll in terms of nominal account management, general ledger posting, cost control accounting across the globe, financial planning and analysis, tax. Somebody in tax wants to know, what have we paid out in the 6% social insurance in Brazil in the last 18 months? Well, there you go. It's on the platform. Knock yourself out. These are the types of things that people want to know they have access to. It makes their life easier. People are innately selfish, so if they feel they can benefit from something, they will ultimately be bought into the process. Procurement, it's all about spending cost. When you look at procurement, it's about cost analysis. I would see procurement as the portal for innovation into an organization, but they need access to visible costs. So to have access to that, procurement now are sitting up and standing and looking at this and saying, well, we absolutely know what we're getting and the return on this based on X, Y, and Z. And then just other functions outside of that, HR, trends around attrition. Why are we losing all of these people in April? It's because our annual bonus happens in March. But if you can't visually represent that on a platform that's pushed out of payroll, it's not always as obvious. And these are just basic examples. And a true global platform around analytics will offer all of the above on a single platform with different levels of access. And that removes the need to share information, ship files around. You don't need to introduce data risk where it simply shouldn't exist. And significantly increase the quality of data available for analysis and real-time conversion into leadership reports. That's really where the magic happens, when you're getting something to the top table. And this is after the fact, obviously, once they're bought into the concept. But day to day, then the value add is just continuous, because you're not creating anything. It's just real-time production as a byproduct of payroll through powerful analytics. So that's just the whole concept of why should you care and how do you get others to care with you. It's very much around the alignment with that corporate strategy. So think about that internally if you're trying to convince people as to how and why they should be part of this journey with you. And I hope that makes sense. So the global challenges, the global challenges are pretty consistent for all people that we speak to. And what I want to do is just summarize them. And if nothing else, you leave this webinar saying, thank God I'm not the only person with this headache. And I think that's, that whole idea of strength in numbers and everything else, it becomes even more significant right now. There is a remoteness to what everybody's doing. So, to be on these types of webinars and thought leadership sessions where there's other people doing what you do day to day, suffering the same kind of shortcomings that exist, it is kind of a positive feel from it to know that there are other people out there in the same boat as yourself. So I talked briefly about the patchwork quilt approach. So I just want to flesh that out slightly. This is one of the major challenges in global payroll as it relates to analytics. It's the legacy of the industry. So it's built around different structures dependent on jurisdictions. So a good analytics platform will not be constrained by legacy. There will be no silos. It will be future focused. And you don't build things from the local ground level up. You start with global. You associate everything with global universal concepts, and you bucket in things beneath that and you drop it down. So I think that's a key component. You know, if you're talking about multiple platforms, multiple systems, ultimately that time constraint of manual manipulation of that data as you receive it back becomes a huge time and cost for an organization. But if you're talking about one single code line, future focused, single platform, there's no reliance on disparate legacy, you know, rebadged acquisitions. It's very much about the here and now and how you build from a solid foundation of global and flesh that out over time. The second piece that's hugely important is the absence of real time. Well, I wouldn't say that's hugely important. That's a huge challenge. The absence of real time is a problem. So immediate access post-close or even during processing is a major trouble point for a lot of organizations. So there's often a 24-hour gap between the processing of the payroll being complete and closed off before they can access anything that sits on a platform. So that often sounds like a pipe dream to get it in real time, but powerful analytics, if sourced correctly, it will simply be a byproduct of good global payroll practice. And if the infrastructure behind a solution is truly global, then real time will just be something that happens by default. The delay happens when you're dealing with multiple systems under a platform that's designed and speaks global, but it ultimately relies on a lot of other things underneath the hood to actually get it back up and aggregated at that level. So there's time between that happening. So the third one is the service provider reliance. Often, you know, a good analytics platform will answer all of your questions without having to go to anybody to ask for something. So if somebody wants a particular report or they want access or visibility on the cost of pension contributions in Canada for the last 12 months, they shouldn't have to go to their service provider to find that. They should literally log into their single global platform, click on Canada, punch in the timeframes, at a wage element level, pick pension contributions, separate it out from employer and employee, and there's your report. So relying on your service provider for those ad hoc requests, there's huge time delays, first off, because more often than not, they're not the same priority for the provider because they're scrambling to get payrolls done and out the door. And for you, you know, you're ultimately at the beck and call of somebody else and you can't control the pace of the production of something like that. So that's a big challenge. One provider, multiple platforms. And this is something that it works for certain organizations and it may not work for others, but it's something that we hear quite regularly. It's often how businesses grow. It's just the very nature of a business going global quickly is that there are kind of acquisitions involved. So you're marrying two businesses together. There's often multiple systems involved. So having multiple systems under one provider umbrella, it often does introduce complexities and risks depending on how your organization are set up. It works for some organizations depending on where the large headcount sits, but often for the tail countries of 500, 400 and beneath, that concept of different systems under the hood, it often just becomes a huge barrier to accessing what you really need to give clarity of vision across those tail countries. It doesn't become as big an issue for the larger headcount countries because it's very much an intimate service and there's a huge focus on that because it becomes a huge cost center and there's a bigger focus on those particular parts of the organization. Next one, manual manipulation. I talked a little bit about that. You shouldn't have to go beyond your platform to create anything to allow it to look digestible for somebody in your organization. If you're looking at a gross to net, a basic concept in one country, it should mirror that of another country, albeit the elements will be different. It should be a dynamically structured gross to net, which is consistent across all countries. Even the concept of the production of a GL, it should be zero touch. It shouldn't ever be a case that people are creating VLOOKUPs and pulling it into a format that works for the CFO every month. More often than not, you're spending a day on average a month doing that where it could be spent elsewhere. And then, the whole kind of concept of it being haphazard. If it is disparate, if it is independent, if it's different in different locations, then ultimately can often take on that appearance of something that's so complex, it's almost like a ransom note. And if you can't make sense of that and you're expected to actually create that in a format that makes sense for somebody else, you're never going to get buy-in from people above you in the organization who you need bought into the concept of this function. So they're the challenges that we would see as being the most common as it relates to analytics in an organization. And I know, Mel, we did a kind of a survey not too long ago around, I suppose, how people access certain reports in an organization. I just thought it was quite appropriate to kind of highlight maybe where organizations sit on that. So it actually came to light that only over 70% of the firms who were surveyed don't have access to a real-time dashboard. That's a huge percentage. You can see clearly that only 28% of the organizations who are surveyed as part of that have access to something that happens in real time. So payroll closed, analytics happen, and they're available real time on a dashboard. 57% of organizations rely on their service provider, where they don't have a central dashboard, to produce things ad hoc as they need them. And then the other 15% said that they manually consolidate reports from multiple sources. So again, how do you quantify a good analytics platform? How can you get people bought into the concept of actually standing behind you and signing a check for a project such as this? Well, how do you quantify time? If you on average are spending 2 days a month in payroll, manually consolidating reports from multiple providers for your CFO typically looks at bottom line. You take 2 days, you align that with the average salary for a payroll person in a particular location, and you multiply that out across a 12-month cycle, and you say, there's your return. I've been freed up for this amount of time if I can actually have this in real time. So there's a number of ways to actually achieve it, but it was quite a scary stat that only 28% of organizations who've gone global actually have access to a real-time dashboard. And that maybe is why sometimes people in payroll feel like they are at the end of the information food chain. They're seen as a cost. Support with selling that internal concept, it's even more important now than ever, because access to what you need to get that group buy-in is there. It's out there in the market, and people should be, I suppose, considering it or doing their research if time permits, obviously. Assessing the here and now. And the here and now is very much about, look, it's an assessment, an internal assessment that you could do yourselves on your own organization. There's various different levels of maturity as it comes to analytics and reporting. Most people who are struggling to find information that adds huge value in an organization would be somewhere around 1 or 2. It's the basic repeatable reporting on gross to nets. It's loosely integrated. It's very much focused on the past as opposed to the future. But that real-time dashboard and the analytics, as in number 4 and number 5, you actually start to look at shaping the future of the business. So a lot of companies will look at departmental budgeting. So if you're able to look back at the last 3 years and the trends within that and the costs associated with departments, and it's been pretty steady with maybe a 5% increase year on year, you can almost predict that, look, I need this headcount allocated against my budget for this year based on what's happened over the previous 3. So payroll now is supporting FP&A, it's supporting strategic decisions to help shape the future state of the business. And it's very proactive as opposed to the reactive scenario you're dealing with down at the bottom. So it's all about confidence, it's about security, it's about unlocking what should ultimately be there to bring the status of the department higher. So what to look for, I'm just going to really scan through this pretty quickly. I'm conscious of time as well, Mel. These are some of the kind of key items that we would see companies going to market for. The single global currency report ultimately gets somebody in HQ bought in because they can see everything in that currency, and that's often what they would apply on the corporate finance side. Global control, clarity on true payroll output is often something really basic that's overlooked. And I think future-focused technology is a key component as well. It's something that companies really want to know now. Well, if in 2 years' time we're with you guys, what can we do or what can we expect versus what we see right now? And just some of the kind of basic concepts around this. Data should be real-time. Data should be first. Integrated data into the platform should be managed at a cell level. So no matter what level of detail you require, you should be able to access it locally, globally. And these are your cost summary dashboard. It's showing gross pay contributions, net pay contributions, and that's across a set period of time. Your variance reporting, highlighting anomalies in your payroll. It's showing you where severe variances existed, why they happened, what happened. And it's just giving you an additional layer of comfort as to why certain variances have existed in your payroll before you approve and sign off on them. Variance threshold and tolerance reporting, it's showing you at a country level in rolled up aggregated components of pay as to where the greatest variances are happening and in what locations. So you can clearly see that China, Canada at the top, they're quite haphazard. There's quite a lot of change happening. Germany is a little bit steadier across that year. And India at the bottom, there's quite a bit of change happening within their pay as well. So it's giving visual insights and support that people have been lacking in the past. And for compensation and benefit departments, for financial planning and analysis, these types of trend graphs are often really important because you can see what's driving spikes and trends, but it's enhancing forward-looking control in that operating environment whereby you can see what the costs are at a wage element level in a location, in a native language, or whatever you see fit. So these are just some summary reports. Gender pay gap reporting should be HR reports accessible on a good payroll platform because you hold certain data that will allow that to be produced. So you're looking at trends in your organization across male and female, the average pay at a particular age in that gender. So it's insights that can support greater things than just getting your employees paid. And I think that's the key message. It's those actionable insights that are often overlooked. And I suppose people who have been victims of the legacy of this industry probably have a little bit of doubt around this being a reality. But do your homework, take your time, align your internal teams, do a bit of research in the market. And as I said, these webinars are often huge kind of support structures. So make sure you stay, I suppose, aware of them because they can often open your eyes to things you didn't know existed, or even things that can ultimately make your life easier right now. So that's really kind of, I suppose, a quick whistle stop tour on it. But some of the key points and messages in there would very much be based around that concept of corporate strategy, corporate vision, aligning that with the payroll department and understanding what role you play on that journey at the top of the house.
Thank you, Adrian. Before we move on to Bob, does anybody have any questions at all? If you do have any questions, feel free to unmute your PC or your phone. Do you have any? I have one, which I think Bob and Julie are going to answer part of it anyway. One of the challenges we have in payroll is selling the benefits of something like this across the organisation. How do I convince people in finance, HR, for example, that I can impact their departments in a really positive way?
Yeah, and it kind of goes back to that concept again, Mel, of how do I get that buy-in? So my first question would be, how well do you know those people? The second question would be, if you don't know them well, why don't you know them well? If then you're considering, or you need to understand, I would say start putting in place informal coffee chats with these people. Start to understand the day-to-day pain points that each of these individuals actually have. You cannot address an issue or sell a concept internally in the absence of knowledge on what's making their days difficult. And knowing how payroll can feed into that in a positive way is going to enable you to provide greater insights, but also a more powerful business case internally. So it can take time. But what I would say is internal stakeholder management and relationship management is absolutely crucial. Don't be an island in an organization. You are the most crucial department in any organization. You pay the employees. So make sure you're visible across multiple departments and make sure you're pitching your discussions at the right level. If you're sitting with a CFO who's responsible for a region, they will ultimately know how you can feed into them, but you need to understand how their days are difficult and the impact you can have. It can often be something as basic as automating the GL output from payroll. It frees up one person in their finance team a day a month. There you go, bought in straight away, reallocation of resources. So that's how I would frame that. Get to know people, understand what makes them tick, what pains are they experiencing, and how can you address them through a good payroll solution?
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adrian. And if anybody does have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we can always come back to you. Adrian, if you can stop sharing your screen, and we'll move over to Bob.
Perfect. Thanks, Mel.
Thanks, Adrian.
No worries.
Right. Can you hear me okay?
Brilliantly. Thanks, Bob.
Fantastic. Well, thanks for that, Adrian. Very insightful. There are going to be a few points, I'm sure, that are going to overlap, but you've actually given me a very good segue into part of my conversation, and hopefully I'll do the same for the next session with Julie as well. So thanks for that insight. I think what's been really clear here is that when I was talking to Mel earlier and to Adrian, talking about what we want to cover in this session, I think what Adrian's talked about is the art of the possible. You know, where can you go with a payroll solution globally? What sort of insights can it give you? You know, and how can that operate across your organization and give you insight? What I'm going to talk about, and Adrian did talk about, you do need stakeholders on the journey. And this is my way of supporting organizations through that journey. So I'll talk a little bit about my own personal experiences and items that I would consider are important in helping to take your stakeholders with you on the journey through a payroll project. Before I start, give you, sorry, just going to click through. Just give you a little bit about me. That is me on the right, that one there. That's me. I might look a little bit fuller now because I think COVID's done me in the last 6 to 8 weeks. I haven't been out to the gym. That photo was in January, and I think I'm about a stone heavy already. So I can't wait for the gyms to open up again. About me, I started life in finance. I trained up as an accountant. I did payroll administration. I've acted as a payroll manager. I've been a finance manager. Eventually decided to qualify and become a management accountant and do those things. But you know, that's my background. More recently, I've been holding roles across various industries as ops director, business development director, head of shared services for a number of global organizations, eventually ending up as transformation director in my last sort of permanent role, which was nearly 20 years ago, actually. And I know I look young, but yeah, it was 20 years ago. And then finally, in the last 20 years, I've really acted as an independent consultant across the globe, providing advisory and program leadership to organizations and leveraging a global associate network of around 750 people scattered across the globe. And that's been really valuable to helping clients with their transformation journey and having local support through my network. In terms of some of the clients, I don't want to go through them all, but you know, you can see some of the names on there yourself. You see Daily Mail, Ocado, Dentsu, Coupang out in South Korea has been a really exciting project. These aren't just payroll. Some of these are HR, some of them are finance, and some are payroll, but it just shows my background in supporting organizations through global change. And hopefully some of the experiences that I've had with those organizations, I can now share with you. So let's talk about where Adrian left off. Actually, how do you get the stakeholders to support you in the corner? And I think, Adrian, you called it out really well. You know, you don't want to behave like an island in the middle of nowhere, not interacting with the wider organization. And actually, there are many organizations that have done that well and actually have really engaged with their stakeholders. But some of the organizations I've been to do feel like it's them and they can't get on with the wider organization. So it is important that we talk about those stakeholder groups. So, you know, what is it that I would say to everyone? Whenever you're doing a payroll project, it's not about what you want, because that's the important message. I think too many people talk inwardly about, as a payroll team, I want a new system. But actually, the more you talk about that, the less you'll engage with your wider stakeholders. So really want you to take on board the message. It's not about you for now, right? And if you can internalize that only for the purposes of engaging your stakeholders and getting a project going, really, if you can internalize it's not about you, it's about everyone else, then we can get to a better place that will help you with the project. So really internalize that. Whenever you're talking about anything, don't talk about what you want. Never say, I need a new payroll system. Never say, you know, I need to be able to do bank transfers. You need to talk about what it means for everyone else, because automatically then what you get as an output is a new payroll system ultimately. So really sort of absorb that and make sure you talk about the wider aspect. So who are the wider stakeholder groups? And I've tried to sort of summarize this down to a smaller group of people. And who is it that you would you know, regularly liaise with, right? And you have the payroll function sitting in an organization. So let's talk the first group. I think one of the biggest functions in the organization that you always have is your friends at finance, right? They're always on top of you. They're the ones that say, oh, what's going on here? So really creating that connection with finance, and I hope my handwriting is not too bad, by the way. I'm trying to be creative here and not just do PowerPoint. Linking in with finance as a team is ultimately important. What are they interested in? Find out what the hooks are that they're interested in. Adrian, you called it out. GL reports, you know, understanding and automating GLs. Reconciliation comes up every time with every client I talk to. Why can't I reconcile the payroll reports to what's gone out of my bank account? Why can't I agree the disbursements? And all of that gives a frustration to finance, and they ultimately come back and say, payroll is always wrong. And that's the blame that comes back to the payroll function. So really make sure that you, when you're talking to finance, you don't say, I want a new payroll system. You're saying, I understand that at the moment the GL reports aren't great. I know that some of the challenges you've got are your reconciliations and your disbursements. And actually with all of that, I'm not sure it's easy for you to budget or forecast or even cash flow forecast what might be coming over the next 12 months. And Adrian talked about some of the dashboard reporting that's now available in some of the new technologies. All of that is really useful information. So understanding what finance really need to know and making sure you talk about what they want as opposed to what you want will make sure that you get them on the side as well. And regulatory reporting obviously is a key aspect that finance wants to make sure that they're not going to have any challenges when it comes to financial reporting. So really important department in finance. Who are your next stakeholder groups? And I think we all talk about the HR community, and my handwriting is getting really bad, isn't it, by the way? So, but you know, we talk about the HR community. So again, what is it that the HR community really needs from the payroll function? Adrian, you talked about aligning it to corporate strategy. I talked about the people strategy, which generally would be aligned to a corporate strategy. So really making sure that the payroll team understands how the people strategy that HR will be defining and how you can support that. So again, not saying what you want, but saying this is how we can help you achieve your people strategy. The employee experience is vitally important to the HR community as well. But then it goes further, right? How many times, how many organizations do we ever go to and say data's rubbish, or actually the data's not quite right? And again, as long as we internalize that that's a problem, and we recognize that when we're talking to HR and even finance, saying we understand there's a data problem today, will help you get them on side and say, I'm going to help sort that problem out. And then there's things like HR. HR always tends to get the queries, my pay's wrong, or actually I've been deducted too much tax today, or actually I don't understand this allowance that's been deducted or this benefit. So again, making sure you understand how you can alleviate some of the pain that HR feel today by supporting them and saying, I get your problem. So engaging with them and understanding their challenges is vitally important. And then I think the third real big component is the IT team, because we underestimate how much influence that they probably have across an organization. They're really looking at things like data privacy, information security. And as we know, really with the GDPR and the fines, 4% of annual turnover fines for GDPR and data leakage, they're huge numbers. If you're a £100 million organization, you could get fined up to £4 million. Well, there's your business case straight away, right? So talking to IT and making sure you support their data privacy challenges, their information security, and also talk about how data transfer happens and secure, and really supporting the compliance aspects that an IT organization is accountable for from the exec. Then we have what I call the business side. Who are the real sort of counterparts in the business? And I'm just looking at my notes. So we've got the operational teams, right? So operational leadership. Are you talking to your ops leaders and your department heads and talking about what some of their challenges are? Well, they'll be looking for real-time reporting. Adrian, great concept about How do I know what's going out this month? How am I, budgeting and forecasting? How much do I know? Am I on track with my sales income versus my potential cost of my team to support that? And really being able to say, we know that that's a challenge today, and a lot of organizations do reactive reporting. Being proactive and allowing operational management to be able to see things in real time through dashboards, it's going to be a huge win for them. So again, recognizing some of the operational challenges and what their challenges are is going to help you get a really good case for change. We can't forget the employees. Now, believe it or not, they're a really important stakeholder groups because they can give you some real, input and credibility about it. And also, if you've got unions and you've got, out in Germany, the works councils and places like that, really understanding the employee journey and some of the challenges that they've got is going to be a really important stakeholder group for you as well. How do they access their information and their pay slips? How do they understand early payment drawdowns? There's organizations now looking to obviously replace the sort of, payday loan sort of scenario. Can I get access to that? And is that really a challenge in the business? And understanding those things are quite important. But giving, employees access to pay slips, understanding their year-end summaries, their contributions, again, would be a really important stakeholder group. Let's not ignore that group of people that are going to help you get a real case for change together. And then the last group of people, I put them down as the exec. They're the ones that have got the purse, right? They're the ones that are going to say, we're going to do this. So you can't do it without really engaging the executive community. And what's that board really looking for? Well, they'll be thinking about things like operational risk. Now, we have a great opportunity in the payroll organization to use COVID-19 as an example, right? My hat's off to every payroll manager, every payroll person over the last 3 months. What you have done has been amazing to keep the world going. You've dealt with furlough arrangements that are coming at short notice. You've dealt with having to work from home. Now, operational risk is going to continue to be part of the world in the future. So take the opportunity to work with the executives and the organizations to understand future operational risk. Is there going to be another COVID-19 scenario, something else coming along the way that may cause this problem? And then there's reputational. Executives and board members are absolutely always looking at reputational risk. Am I going to get information security leaks? And is GDPR going to come hit us? Are we going to get in the newspaper because we've suddenly leaked a load of data? And again, understanding those challenges are going to help you really engage with that stakeholder group. So going to them and saying, what we need to do is make sure we mitigate against any risk on data. We need to avoid fines. And again, using 4% of GDPR is a great example of a big number that will always exist. But also, don't forget, they will want to know, are there cost efficiencies that are gained from this? And that not always about cost efficiencies. Sometimes it's about cost avoidance as well. So actually putting something in today may avoid you having future costs as you grow as an organization. And Adrian, one of the last points that you talked about again was being fit for the future, right? Putting in something today that enables an organization as part of their strategy that may be growing across the globe, growing locally, etc. So I really wanted to try and sort of talk about the community that payroll needs to come out of its island, as Adrian said, and really engage with a number of key departments across the group. And there may be others, right? Every organization may have a compliance function or a legal team that need to be engaged. So this is just trying to say, come outside of the payroll team, come outside of the office, come outside of your comfort zone and start understanding what is the wider audience needs in order to deliver what you want. So I'll summarize really by saying, really focus on what's in it for your stakeholders, right? Talk about highlighting the compliance benefits. What you're trying to achieve in the organization is about compliance. Talk to the people that are really interested in compliance, right? The board, the IT function that really wants to make that compliance is high on the list. Call out and talk to people in the risk departments or in finance about how we're going to make sure, we need to make sure that we've got suitable technology in place to do risk avoidance. Talk about the cost efficiencies of those people and talk about cost avoidance in the same manner. Lots of organizations are starting to recognize that you may invest money today, but actually if we can prove that we avoid future spend, then we're going to be in a better place. So it's lots of boards will recognize it's not all about today's saving, it's about future avoidance. Really focus on the strategic aspects that you're trying to create, and you know, recognizing that an organization may be growing. I'm in the midst of another payroll review now. We're talking about where they might be in 3 years' time, and making sure that what we design and deliver today and we engage with, it's all about where they're going over the next 3 years. It's not about fixing today, it's about fixing for the future. And really also then focus on how it brings the experience to the benefits. So again, COVID-19 has been a great example. Have we been able to get electronic pay slips out? Have people got access to their pay calculations? Do they understand what furlough means? And all of those enabling technologies that actually in the future we'll need more and more, because instances of what we've been going through may become more and more apparent and more regular. So I'm going to stop there and you know, say thank you for listening. Thanks to you, Mel, and the GPA for getting me on board, and thanks Adrian and then the Immedis team for having me speak a bit here. And there's my contact details should there be anything that anyone wants to pick up with me afterwards. But happy for any questions, Mel.
Yeah, as I said earlier, if anybody's got any questions, feel free to unmute your PC or your phone. I do have one here. It's actually a good question. I'm not saying that all the questions aren't good. But you talked about engaging a number of different stakeholders within an organisation. Who would you consider the most influential in getting buy-in is?
I think there's probably two functions that I think really do provide the most challenge in getting a buy-in for a new project. I think one of them is finance, right? Because generally, if you can get the finance manager, the finance directors on board, then actually engaging at an executive level, the CFOs that may sit on board, just feels a lot easier to do. So for me, getting finance really buying into the value that a new payroll technology will bring from dashboards, reporting, forecasting, compliance, data protection, all of those things tends to be one of the hardest ones. So if you get finance engaged very early, I think that's a really good win. And the second part to it now is I wouldn't underestimate how much IT is now having an influence on where organizations are going with technology, right? And ultimately, the payroll system is a technology solution. Now, they may not be the owners of that solution, but they really will have a say. Is it compliant? Is the information security keeping in there? And it's those aspects. So I think if you can get IT and finance really behind you, not saying you don't need the other departments, you need the HR teams, you need, you know, the operational teams, etc. But if you can get finance and IT behind you, I typically find 90% of the business cases tend to be a little bit easier. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, I'll mute myself. I think people wish they could do that in real life, like mute me. Anyway, so thank you so much, Bob. If you could stop sharing your screen and we'll move over to Julie. So one of the key things here I've asked Julie to speak today is that we have so many people asking me about procurement, and procurement seems to be involved so much in business decisions to do with payroll. And I've been asked, how do you influence procurement, or how do you become friends with procurement? And Julie's background is procurement, so but you see it from a more holistic point of view. So I'm so glad that Julie could join us today. So I'm going to pass you over to Julie now.
Thanks so much, Mel, and thank you to everyone for hanging on for this last session. And thank you to Bob and Adrian. I really appreciate your very great intros. Bob's been kind enough to leave off his chart procurement as on purpose, because he knows I'm going to talk about it today. So I will just do one check. Can you hear me? And Mel, can you see the screen? We're all good. Great. So just for those of you who've come in not at the beginning, my name is Julie Smith. I've been working in global procurement for about 15 years. I started at places like Deloitte in Australia, and then I went to Switzerland and was working with Syngenta, and then went to PMI. And then in the UK, it's been with BAT and ABI. I seem to go to a lot of three-letter companies. And so I've been in supporting HR for that whole time, and, you know, feel like an extension of HR from supporting them for such a long time. So I'm going to talk to you today about what procurement is and what procurement isn't, and also talk to you about ways that you can effectively work with procurement and what procurement can do to help you, and to also give you a checklist of key points where you can take away with you. So what I've done is, I'm just going to quickly fix my screen so I cannot see all of the cameras. Get them out of the way. So the first thing I'm going to start with is around what procurement is. In essence, you have a group of people in your organization who are commercial subject matter experts and can help you manage your spend that you use with all third parties. And it's not just about the cost. It's looking at it from assessing the quality, the service, the risk, so that it's got those 4 components rather than just the one component. Your procurement department is great at bringing to you some insights on trends, on what are some of the threats happening in the marketplace, also what are some of the opportunities, who are the disruptors, and what's going on out in the world. They're also a team that are solution providers. So we change the way that the business does business. And as you know, Bob and Adrian have also spoken about, risk is something that's super important to keep in focus. And we can actively help as a department with your risk and compliance management. And most importantly, procurement's there to be a business partner to you and collaborate with you. You're our customer, and it's really important that collaborative spirit and building a partnership is key to having an effective engagement with procurement. So procurement is not and should not, and this is my opinion of years of working as a procurement person. We're not the money police. That's our lovely dear friends in finance. That's their job, to be the money police. And of all the companies that I've worked at and worked in procurement, we are not the budget owners. You're the budget owner as the payroll team or HR or finance or whatever function procurement is supporting. We're there to help you make the most out of your budget, but we're not the budget owners. And because we're not the budget owners, we're also not the ultimate decision maker, and we're not there to take decision-making powers away from everybody. This next point is probably a contentious one because it's often the most frequent feedback is procurement is here and they're slowing us down. You've got complex processes. We really shouldn't. And if you're looking for things to challenge your procurement department on, challenge them on being simple and effective with how they buy things for you. And also, procurement should not be just trying to do one size fits all, especially in global organizations where you need to take local regulations and the LFRs into consideration. It's really important to be adaptable and aware of what's happening beyond your own office. So I have a quick poll question, and I'm just going to look to Mel to launch the poll.
Yeah.
And hopefully it will work. So the poll question is your procurement team that you're working with now effective in supporting you and delivering value? So if the poll's open, please join to give an idea of whether you think your team is effective, very effective, slightly effective, or not effective at all. So
yeah, it is open, and we have 43% of people have answered. So if you can just take 2 seconds out to answer it. There was one that was answered very quickly.
Mel, if you can give me a summary of what the results are, that would be...
It will launch, so I'll wait till it comes to the end.
Okay.
Give it a minute. So we've had 58%, so if we can try and get it 70%, I'll be happy, and I'll leave everyone alone.
No need to harass everyone.
Okay. Just need a couple more people.
Super. This will just give me a flavour or a temperature check of how you are currently feeling about your procurement team.
Okay, so I'll end the poll now. Is that okay?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Mel.
Okay, here are the results. Can you see the results?
Yes, I can. Okay, so we've got probably 80% as effective and below, which as a procurement person, you know, slightly heartbreaking, but also not a surprise from my engagement with a range of different HR people across many organizations when I speak at HR events. So what can we do to ensure that we effectively work with procurement? At the end of the day, what you're trying to achieve with your procurement team is mutual understanding. And if I start from the payroll side, what I think it's important for the payroll team to do is to spend time with procurement to understand what their drivers are. For all the organizations that I've worked with across the years, we always have a financial measure and a non-financial measure. For example, it's savings and it's customer service. And I think it's important for you to understand what drives the procurement team and what value they can then deliver. So really spend the time to ask some key questions and really listen to what they have to say. And on the flip side, it's the same for procurement. It's really important that the procurement team spend time with you in payroll to understand what are your objectives. You know, mapping out what are the key milestones and your pain points, understanding what your budget is. Again, ask and listen to both sides. That's really going to help you build that mutual understanding and agree on these objectives moving forward. And then from a knowledge perspective, as if you're wanting to review your payroll providers, for example, it's really important that the payroll team understands the level of payroll knowledge that the procurement team have. And what are you going to do and what can you plan to upskill them as much as possible? And on the flip side, procurement spends some time talking with payroll about their risks and what risks they face and what's the impact of those risks, mapping it all out. Again, it's great for building this understanding and what the drivers are and how you can help. And then on both sides, there's some preparation that needs to happen. So payroll agree with procurement on what the objectives are, what is going to be your measures of success, and who's going to do what. And then procurement spend the time learning about the payroll processes, the systems, the technology, and the supplier market. Really be clear on who's doing what. And this at least sets the infrastructure in the scene for you to have the really good, effective relationship with procurement. So what is key to think about also is, you know, what problem are you trying to solve? So let's take a scenario that you've got some problems with your current provider and you want to see what's going on out in the market and you may potentially want to change provider. So there's always steps that you want to consider. And the reason that I'm sharing these steps today is around the concept of time. You know, time is often the feedback that you get about procurement. It takes so long to go through the process or it's cumbersome. So I want you to be having that open discussion with your procurement team around how much time you have. And is it something that you've got a short amount of time or you've got a longer amount of time? So these 5 steps will always be there regardless of what it is you're doing. So spend the bulk of your time at the preparation and analysis phases. You know, this is where you really are having that time with each other to build out what's the purpose of what you're trying to do, what objectives do you want to achieve, what outcomes do you want, and what are the outputs that are going to come as a result of it. And as all of us know and have learned over the last sort of decade, data is key. So it's putting together that data. Where is it? How am I going to get it? And mutually agree on what actions you're going to take that address the problem that you're trying to solve. So those sort of preparation and analysis phase is where you're going to spend the bulk of your time. And then you're either going to move into a sourcing activity or a problem solving process. But let's take the scenario of a sourcing activity. This is often where I find the stakeholders step out of the process. And it's really important that you be involved. And the reason that we want to collaborate with you and be involved is that the solution at the end that's found is not going to be used by the procurement team. It's for you. So we really want you to be there throughout that whole process. And you can challenge that process along the way to make sure that it's fit for purpose for what you're looking for. And then make the time for when the results come in, for example, of a sourcing activity. Again, this is from past experiences. We challenge to get the stakeholders back into the room to be going through the results. And they're really important because you'll need them for any business case. You'll need them for decision makers. You'll need it to be able to explain why you want to go down a particular path. And then when you get to final results, it's, have you met the measures of success that you agreed to in that preparation phase? And, who is going to do what after implementation? Some procurement departments and some companies do get involved in implementation and others don't. So that's where it's key to agree who's doing what. And did you get the value that you agreed in the preparation phase? And this is a great opportunity as payroll people when you're working with procurement, is at that sort of final results stage. It's good to have that conversation with them about what worked well throughout that process and what didn't. Because as true partnerships develop, you put yourself in a continuous improvement cycle. So you want to be able to see where you can make those improvements. Okay. The other things I wanted to share with you is what procurement can do for you that you may or may not be aware of. And I've split it into 4 areas. So the first one is around the supplier market. It kind of goes without saying that one of the key roles of procurement is to help you find the right providers. But one of the other things that you can ask your procurement team to do if they haven't done it already is supplier mapping. So this is you agreeing around some basic criteria and procurement going and doing the research and coming back with, say, a heat map of suppliers. Who's doing really well in certain, in performance? Who's winning clients, losing clients? Who's been taken over? Who's expanding? Who's reducing their business? And plotting it out so that you have a clear view of what's happening in the marketplace. Who are the new entrants? Who's disrupting the market? That's something that you can get them to actively work on for you. And if you don't already have it, then I really strongly encourage you to have supplier relationship management program. An SRM program is really valuable to ensure that you don't have a set and forget mentality with your suppliers. It provides governance by getting the right people from the right functions in the room to talk about how your payroll provider is performing. It's an opportunity to have both operational and strategic conversations. And it's also a way for the provider to talk about what value they're delivering. And it's then wrapped up around, again, some continuous improvement. And continuous improvement is on both sides. There may be certain things that you're doing as a company as part of your processes or systems that are hindering the performance of the vendor. And likewise, the vendor may be doing some things that are hindering your performance. So this is a great way to be always having a forum for continuous improvement. Another thing you can do with your procurement team, you can ask them to set this up for you, is an innovation day. And it can either be with your incumbent or it can actually be with new entrants or other providers in the marketplace, where they can come and showcase what's happening. And this is a great way for you to be aware of what's happening in the market, or it's a great way for your incumbent to really come to the table with some innovation they've got from their other clients or they've seen in other industries. The next sort of area is speed and simplicity, something that we all need far more frequently these days, and something we're asked for a lot. So efficiency and effectiveness is a conversation that you would want to be having with your procurement department, and they should be leading that conversation. how can they help you with your payroll processes, be it eliminating tasks, simplifying tasks, automating? Are we onshoring, offshoring? Are we outsourcing, insourcing? Those kinds of discussions will really help you find ways and means to be far more effective and efficient. And to complement that, also source the best technology that's going to enable you to do the simplification. And an output of all of that is your resourcing. You know, procurement should be impacting your organizational design. We're all under headcount pressure. It's not always just about losing people, it could be around redeploying, but procurement can play a role in helping you optimize your resourcing. And always be in a position where you're challenging them on providing you with a way that you can purchase things faster and simpler. I think that's a fundamental thing, that when we talk about efficiency and effectiveness, it's not just about the payroll experience, it's about all the other functions you work with in the organization, and procurement included. And then the final one is about the help they can give you when you're opening up new markets. So if they have helped you do supplier mapping and also got a very robust supplier relationship management program in place, then when it comes to a time when you want to open into new countries, then actually you'll have an idea of who's available to use you, and actually a good understanding of whether your incumbent provider could work well in that new market, and be able to ease you through the process so much faster than if you haven't built up that good relationship with them and they haven't, and they can deliver the value for you in terms of telling you what's happening out on the supplier market. So one of the things with opening into a new country is speed, and it's really important that you involve procurement early in those discussions, because they can really help you with your speed agenda. And then Bob touched on this as well about, your reputation and employer brand. It's something that procurement people actively work to ensure that the brand is protected, but also that the suppliers we're working with are not doing any damage to the reputation of the organization, and also that we're acting ethically and appropriately with our vendors. So we have that in our minds when we're working through which vendors are fit for purpose and what are we doing to ensure that we protect the brand. And I would actively encourage everybody to do some form of design thinking training and agile training, because having the user at the heart of it and the user experience is really key to having good discussions between, in this case, procurement and payroll, because who's the end user and what is it going to mean for them? And that helps you with things like your processes, what technology are we going to use, who's the best vendor for us to be partnered with that's going to have a positive user experience. And the next one is specific to you as payroll people in terms of your experience. We can always go out and you can get the most expensive and the cheapest. But what we're really aiming for is sustainable pricing. You're a business that wants to make money. The vendor is a business that wants to make money. You have to enable them to make money. What you're looking for is what's competitive and what's sustainable. The more that you push on the price, there's a likelihood it's going to damage the performance and the service that you get on the other side. So it's around aiming for sustainable pricing, but being in a position where you've got really great quality and service performance. And then with partnership with IT, procurement and IT often work hand in hand, because it's around what you can do from a compliance perspective. So procurement is there, again, another great internal resource to help you ensure that your data is fully protected. Has it been integrated with all other systems that it needs to be? Supporting any other agendas that you may have from business continuity, CSR, sustainability, etc. And of course, meeting the ever-growing list of compliance and regulations, from GDPR, as Bob mentioned, you've got Sarbanes-Oxley, IR35, the list, ABAC, the list goes on and on. So that's just 4 areas that I wanted to share, just to give you a flavor of some of the other things we do, on the premise that you may not have a fully effective relationship with your procurement people, and it might be more transactional. And I really encourage you to have these understanding discussions so that you can move to a more partnership-based relationship with them, and really be able to get the value that you deserve from the procurement function. So just to wrap up and leave you with a bit of a checklist, for the payroll people, if there is something that you're wanting to do, and it could be solve a problem, get a new provider, find out what's happening on the marketplace, whatever the activity is, when you're engaging with your procurement people, be specific on what it is you want, especially if it is actually going and buying something, because the scope is so critical to get right so that we can find the right solution for you. Agree who is doing what and by when. That whole management is where it can derail quite quickly. And if you have all of those good discussions, you'll find life is much easier for you. And the other one is about knowing who is paying for what. And that comes from having worked in organizations where if you were buying some new software or a system for the payroll department, it may be that IT was the budget owner and HR was the end user, or the payroll team was the end user. And therefore, it's got to be clear as to who's paying for what, because they could have different approval processes, different stakeholders being involved, and different requirements. So get that clear up front so all of the right stakeholders, especially all the ones that Bob mentioned, can be included in any process. And then agree with your procurement team on what good looks like and how your success will be measured. And I think, you know, with something like payroll, your day-to-day is always got some level of risk, and it's around, you know, keeping that in your focus and solution building to ensure that the risk is minimized or eliminated as much as is possible. And then it's around, as a wrap up, have that joint discussion with your procurement team on what's next. You know, it could be that you've been through a sourcing process, and the what's next could be around, you know, running an innovation day. It could be around, okay, what's next for procurement in terms of what can you do to make this so much better the next time. So have those open feedback discussions. At the end of the day, procurement is there to support you, and they're a great resource that can really help you, as I said, solution build, problem solve, but they are your partner. So that's my thoughts for today. I'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Julie. We have like quite a quiet audience today with a lot of people off camera. I think last time we did it, we had more people on camera and talking. So, but I'll let you off. Tom, I think. Hi, Tom. Just pick on you because you're the first one we've come across. If anybody has any questions, feel free. Obviously, if you don't want to, unmute your phones. If you have any questions, please put them on chat. I do actually have one that was sent to us. With regards to, I think this is to do with software, why does it take so long to source something? Are they blaming procurement on that, are they?
You could blame procurement, you can blame IT, you can blame a whole range of different things. So the time, really, it definitely can take a long time to buy software or anything else. It can. So this is about making sure you're clear on what it is you want up front. And if you're not clear, then it's around working that through with procurement, because they will know the questions to ask you to help pull out some information. And if you feel that the procurement process in your organization is too long, some people use a 5-step, 7-step, 12-step process, then challenge your procurement team on how they can simplify that for you. but be upfront about the time you have available, the money you have available, and what it is you're really looking for. And that should help streamline the process down and make it a bit quicker for you to get what you want.
And I think maybe this is like a question that maybe Bob and Adrian also get frustrated with, because I actually had this conversation with somebody just before this webinar, and it's why can't I have the supplier that I want?
I mean, I will let the other guys jump in on that one as well. You can have the supplier that you want, but is that supplier that you want going to meet the requirements that you've agreed with procurement, finance, legal, IT? It may be the supplier that you want, but maybe they don't have the data integrity or the security that's required by your IT architecture team. Maybe their financials are actually not great and they don't pass certain financial requirements. Maybe the reference checking proved that they were not going to be great in the long run. There is quite a few different reasons why they may not be, you may not get the provider that you thought you really wanted. Bob, Adrian, any comments on that?
I think I would answer that question by, the very first thing I said, it's not about you.
Yeah.
And the question was, why can't I get the payroll provider that I want? What we've got to make sure is that all the other parties, as you say, Julie, IT, finance, actually are engaged, and therefore they may have something that's needed for themselves that doesn't reach. So I think it's about what's right for us as opposed to what's right for me. And I think that's a really important message to keep going. And you're right, Julie, a lot of providers may not meet compliance needs or data protection needs, and even some of the ISO accreditations and things like that some organizations work to, and therefore have only a certain amount of vendors that they can work with.
Okay.
Well, I just want to say to the person that just texted me about them not being on camera about their hair, sorry, but there's no excuse. We're all suffering with the COVID lockdown, whether it's weight increase or hair.
I'm in my shorts, and I'm happy to admit it as well. I've got a shirt on, but I've got my shorts on.
This is like the newsreaders. We just have a couple more questions if we've got time to stay on.
Yes.
With so many vendors in the marketplace, what approach to shortlisting for RFP would you recommend? So should I start with maybe Bob and then Julie? Should we do it that way around?
Yeah, I'm happy. I mean, I think there's two parts. So people like myself would spend time in the marketplace understanding the technology, and we work closely with people like Adrian and other vendors in the marketplace, and really spend a lot of time understanding what their capabilities are and how they operate. And I go across the globe and look at the market and understand what that looks like. But also having the real experience of how it's worked in organizations means that we can bring some guidance and some thoughts about what might be right for certain organizations. And then, Julie, I think there's a procurement angle to all of this. Again, I don't think one person can really come up with a final list. There's a recommendation list that I could provide, and then there's a procurement list, right?
Well, it's actually that mutual agreement, those mutual things. So your criteria, I would always limit the criteria to be less than 6, preferably 3 to 5. And it's service, performance, quality, those kinds of things. And actually, once you agree at what the criteria is, and it could even be simple things like geography. Some vendors may be automatically eliminated because they can't meet the geography requirements of the customer. So I think what you can do is you agree what it is you're looking for, what's the criteria, and then procurement can come back and give you a recommended short list to start with. So instead of having 50 vendors, it might be that you get it down to, say, a dozen that you may want to speak to, and then you start going through a process there to get down to a smaller number. Okay,
we'll just have please, if anybody does have any more questions, then feel free to ask, but we just have one more question.
Have you got the one in the chat, Mel?
Yeah, this is what I'm reading from. So, okay. For smaller companies which have a minimal procurement team, our team is one person, how do you expect this to limit what procurement can offer? What is their key responsibility?
So if you are a procurement team of one, I have been in that experience myself, then prioritization is key. So you need, the procurement person needs to be clear on what the priorities for the business are. And the key thing that they need to deliver is the most effective management of your external spend. So they need to work through that spend with you and map that up with what pain points the business is having and what problems need to be solved. And again, always aligning to the business objectives. And that's what they should be focused on. So it could be that payroll's on that list of procurement activities, or it may not be. But their key focus is maximizing and getting the best bang for their buck out of that spend that you have, or the budget that you have, because you want more out of your budget for less budget. And that's their core focus. Their key responsibility, Harriet, is really around optimizing the spend available.
Okay, fab. Oh, we have one new message come up. Oh, thank you. Okay, brilliant. So I just want to say thank you once again to Immedis for sponsoring this event, and for Adrian speaking today, and of course Bob and Julie sharing your expertise. It's I think it's been a really good session. It's been slightly different to the previous ones that we've done, and hopefully it gives people some more insight on how we can increase the profile of the payroll profession and start moving it forward. If people do want to get in touch with you, I know you put your details up, but they can obviously connect with you. Is that okay, Adrian, on LinkedIn, and Bob and Julie?
Absolutely.
Yes, of course.
Absolutely.
And if there's any further questions that people have, please do get in touch via LinkedIn, etc.